We're connecting to Instagram. Okay. Hi, Mom. How are you? Welcome.
Well, I'm surviving. Thanks.
I know. It's been a long time. I don't know when our last one was. I guess it was October because we did witchy reads, but
Something in mid-October, I think.
It's been rough reading lately.
And it has. And the reason being, I know some of my blog readers will know this, but my husband suddenly developed Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a rather uncommon neurological disorder that causes paralysis. And he was waiting for back surgery because he was having some disc issues. And the symptoms of this new condition were masked by his spinal issues. Everybody was looking at his spinal column and the discs and the pain he was suffering and thinking, well, that's why you can't feel your feet. But anyway, things went from bad to worse, and he has actually been in the hospital and in acute rehab since October 21st. So here we are. It's November 22nd. So it's been a long
23rd.
23rd. See, I don't even know what day it is. But it's been difficult to concentrate on reading. And I've got a few ideas. I managed to get through some books, and I think they might just fit the bill if you, as I was, are having any kind of difficulty concentrating or have other issues going on in your life that make reading and focusing on a book more challenging than usual.
Yeah. I did not read very much. I definitely did not read physical books. I was listening to books. And so most of these, they're all going to be audio because that's what I had the mental capacity for, of just like maybe as I'm doing chores or as I'm going to bed, like listening or driving. So yeah. And also, go ahead.
On that note, I had a bit of a disaster. I keep a reading log spreadsheet, and it's very complete with publishing dates, with just all the information, Goodreads rating, my rating. It's very, very thorough. And I somehow deleted both 2023 and 2024. I've worked for days recreating 2024.
But you have a Mac. Can't you go into like Time Machine and get it back?
I don't know anything about Time Machine. Maybe if you know Time Machine, you can put me in touch and I can figure it out. But in the meantime, I did recreate 2024, including my TBR list. Yeah. And here's the thing that's interesting. My TBR list is vast, and I have a lot of print books that are actually sitting on my shelves, but I also have a lot of books that are digital and are sitting on my Kindle. And I've been tracking these going back to 2020. So we've got 5 years worth of books. And what I have discovered is that a lot of these books on my TBR that are rated pretty high on Goodreads, like maybe they've got like a 4.0 or higher rating, I'm putting those as priorities ahead of the ones that are 3.4, 3.5.
Yeah.
But at any rate, my point is, even though I own these books and I have a digital copy of most of them, I can go on Hoopla or Libby and borrow the audio version and listen to it that way. I could also read it and listen and sort of do a multiple format thing. But I'm thinking that borrowing these books for free on a format such as Hoopla is a brilliant way to actually get these books read.
Yeah. I don't do very well with digital. Like if I get a Kindle version, I am not reading a Kindle version. I would rather hold the book in my hand or just listen.
I like Kindle a lot and I use it a lot, but the number of books that I have sitting in my TBR on my Kindle, I mean, I can't keep track of it. That's why I have to make this spreadsheet. And the only way I've figured to prioritize them is to just go by ranking them by the Goodreads score.
Yeah.
Because that's fairly reliable for me, unless it's fantasy. And people who read fantasy always love their books and rate them 5 stars. But any other genre is pretty realistic, I think. So anyway, that was a very long-winded explanation of my plan to tackle this TBR.
Tell me more about Hoopla. I've never heard of that. Am I saying, is it Hoopla?
It's Hoopla. I used to live in Palo Alto, as you know, because you lived there too.
Yep, I was there.
The Palo Alto Library was right across the street from our house.
Yes,
and so we are longtime Palo Alto Library patrons.
Mm-hmm.
And once you don't even have to live in Palo Alto anymore to have a Palo Alto library card. I mean, you can have a library
I think you need to be a resident of California, though.
Maybe. But Palo Alto Library is great, but there are other great libraries, even in other states, that I think you can get a library card, which gives you access to Hoopla.
Cool.
And a lot of times you'll look up a book, When We Were Brave and Beautiful, and Palo Alto Library will show you that it has a physical copy located at the main library branch. You could also borrow an e-copy through Libby, usually. Yeah. And if you want to listen to the book in an audio format, you go through Hoopla. And it's free. It's absolutely free.
I know that Libby also does audiobooks too. So that's a great resource for me because sometimes the book that I want to listen to isn't available right now. And I could try Hoopla too.
Well, you do have to have the app on your phone because that is how you listen to it. You listen to it through your phone.
Well, okay. Let's switch gears. Oh, what was I going to say? I have a little update that I will be interviewing an author named Carter Wilson soon. He has a book coming out in January called Tell Me What You Did. And it's a thriller. And it is. I'm gonna read a quick little synopsis. So this is about a woman who runs a top-ranked podcast in the country. And I did say that I was like a little bit over all of these thrillers that have to do with podcasts, but I am getting a little bit more into them. So
it's
anyway,
a thing right now. You have to admit it's a definite thing.
This one though, the premise sounds so good. So she runs a top-ranked podcast where she invites people to anonymously confess crimes they've committed. And she can't guarantee that the police won't come after her quote unquote guests, but her show grants simultaneous anonymity and instant fame, not only for herself, but for these people. But after an episode recording, this young lady usually erases both criminal and crime from her mind. Like she just moves on. This is a business for her. But a strange and oddly familiar man appears on her show, and she's forced to take a second look, not only because he claims to be her mother's murderer from years ago, but because she knows something that no one else does, that her mother's murderer is dead. So because she killed him. So that's the premise. Very weird. But anyway, so I'm looking forward to having Carter on. And what I'm bringing this up for is to say that his publicist mentioned that I've already downloaded this on that place where you download books arcs ahead of time. Help me.
Oh, right.
And I haven't gotten to it yet because it's a like a digital book version. So it's a sticky point for me. So I need to get on that and quickly read it. But anyway. Okay, moving on.
Sounds fascinating, Sarah. I'll look forward to listening to it.
Yeah, sounds good. And Carter himself, the author, has a podcast where he talks to other authors and they just talk shop, which I love.
I love that. Tell me, how did you meet Carter?
I haven't met him yet, but he is published through Poison Pen Press, which I'm a big fan of. And I've already interviewed Andrew D. Young, who is a domestic thriller author through Poison Pen Press.
That was a great podcast, by the way. If anybody hasn't listened to it, go listen to that one because it was a really good interview that Sarah did.
Andrew's very, very nice and he's just such a fun, like kind person. And then, it's just strange to interview someone who has written something so creepy.
He
So
seems like such a delightful all-American family guy,
he is. He is. Anyway. So yeah, Carter's, just for anyone who wants to listen or check it out, the Unbound Writers Retreat. That is Carter Wilson's podcast, the Unbound Writers Retreat. So anyway,
what's the name of his upcoming book again?
Tell Me What You Did.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, so that'll be January. Okay, so why don't you start, Mom? Chuck, let's talk about what you've.
Well, I've got three books, actually 4, but
we have a theme kind of today.
We do, and the theme is my theme is books that I could enjoy and concentrate on, even though I've got a lot of other kind of heavy things going on in my life right now.
But also there's like a 3, a 2, and a 1 theme.
Yes, these are 3 books I've read recently, and then I'm going to talk to you about 2 books that I have DNF'd recently. Yep. And 1 book that I bought that I'm really looking forward to. I meant to bring it up here. Darn it, I forgot. I left it downstairs, but I'll tell you.
I have the same 3, 2, 1.
Oh, good. Okay. So. Actually, this is a great format. We could keep this one and
I don't like
it out if we don't have a special theme.
That's not a bad idea. Like my husband Jeff gets after me. He doesn't like not finishing a book. He's a completionist, but I am not always able to. I cannot.
Too many books. Life's too short. If you don't like it, ditch it. Okay, well, this book, the first book that I'm going to talk about, was one that I mentioned in our last podcast as a book that I had purchased and was really looking forward to reading. And it is called The Spellshop by Sarah Beth Durst, published by Bramble in July of this year, 2024. And so I'm kind of circling back to that because I was talking about it and saying, it really sounded like it had a cool premise. And
I bought it.
I read it and I want to tell you about it.
I read it too. And so this is one of my books that I read and enjoyed that I wanted to mention and talk about with you.
Oh, good. Well, as I said, I mentioned this book as one that I was looking forward to reading. It was described as a cozy, feel-good fantasy, and honestly, this book did not disappoint. It's the story of a shy librarian named Keela and her best friend and assistant, who is a talking spider plant named Kaz. Don't ask me how Kaz can see or how Kaz can talk or how Kaz can like make his little tendrils work like hands, but somehow
do heavy lifting because he can heavy lift.
Yeah, he can carry crates of books somehow. Anyway, don't explore this too deeply. Just accept it. It's a magical story, and they live in a place that's not like here. So there is a revolution in her city, and buildings are being burned, including the libraries. And she is in charge of a section of the library that houses magical spell books that are forbidden to be used by the average person. Only certain sorcerers who have been approved by the emperor are allowed to use these spell books. So Keela takes her responsibilities very seriously, and she feels she needs to protect these books and remove them from the burning library and take them to a safe place where she can watch over them. So she and Kaz pack up, 5 or 6 crates of these magical spell books, load them into a boat that belongs to the library, and they set off for a remote island that, as it turns out, Keela grew up on. Her parents are deceased, but the family home still exists. It's very derelict, but it is livable. So she and Kaz get to this island where Keela grew up, unload the 5 crates of books, and take them into the abandoned house. She finds the island in very depressed circumstances. Since the new emperor has been in charge of things in their magical land, things have not gone well for people who are living in more remote places. The weather's weird. The plants aren't doing very well. Crops are dying, and things are just very depressed and not anything like the good life they used to have. So Keela decides she's going to use a bit of the magic from the spell books to help the island residents get back up on their feet again and to try to correct some of these issues, such as the poor crops. And there's the magical seahorse kind of creatures, and they are having trouble conceiving and propagating their species. And she wants to help,
and they help with like the fish. They help with
there's mermaids and mermen. Yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of magical creatures that are also having difficulties. So what Keela does is, with her friend Kaz's help, she opens up a jam shop in the town as kind of a front for her spell making activities. And I found the plot was engaging. There was enough action that, various things, situations would come up that needed to be resolved. And there was someone who turns up on the island and who claims to be an inspector from the emperor's,
like an inquisitor, kind of
inquisitor, investigator. I forget what they called this woman, but anyway, that was a plot line that was kind of tense, because is Keela going to get busted and get executed for using magic spells inappropriately? So anyway, here's an example. I bought this book. It's a beautiful book. It has sprayed purple edges. It's an absolutely exquisite looking book. What did I do? I listened to the audio version. I listened to it when I was going back and forth to the hospital to visit my husband, which was like a 3-hour drive each way. So yep. I got through this audio version quite nicely. And it was quite well narrated, I thought. And it was the perfect book to distract me from my worries, and it didn't add any tension. So it was just the right thing that I needed. How about you?
I really enjoyed this. At first, I wasn't so sure because I thought the beginning was a little rushed, and it was just sort of glossed over, like all of the chaos that was happening.
Yeah, they had to just get those books to the island, and then the story could start.
Yeah. But I loved this, and I'm gifting this book to my mother-in-law for Christmas. I really loved Kaz, the spider plant, who was just so caring for our main character, and they just had such a strong friendship and a bond, and they were always thinking of each other.
Keela isn't too good at doing spells at first, and she accidentally creates this little cactus creature. Oh my God, he was the cutest thing ever. And he and Kaz got to be friends, and they call him Meep because that's
Meep likes to be called they, them.
Yes, I did notice that, but Meep only speaks Meep. He just says Meep, Meep. Anyway, it was the cutest thing ever. Sorry, I broke into your.
That's all right. I felt like our main character was way too neurotic to be likable. I did not care for her very much, but all the other characters and the entire world that has been built with this novel was enough to keep me going.
What did you think of the gentle little romance that was happening?
I liked it. But what bugged me, and it could be because I wasn't paying attention and I glitched out for a minute, but I don't felt like she ever described the love interest character.
She was very prickly and very introverted, and every time he tried to extend his hand in friendship or to just help her out with stuff that she needed done, she was quite rude and not very accepting of him. Which I found annoying too.
I guess that's not true. He was described as being very tall, kind of like a mountain man a little bit.
Muscles. She mentioned his muscles many times.
Yes, but no, did he have brown hair? Did he have green? No, it's up to you, I guess. As the dear reader, you can now decide what this gentleman looks like.
Do you remember how Keela was described as looking?
Yes, blue skin, blue hair. She had magenta freckles, like a lot of detail, but no detail about the love interest.
Yeah.
Tons
Yeah.
of detail about the other friends she makes who have fur and antlers and,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know. That was a pet peeve.
I liked the flying doctor.
I did too. And I felt like that was a character that really needed to be like pronounce or go into more detail about who's that guy. Tell me more about his mysterious life. So hopefully there's another book. Actually, there is another book.
Really?
I don't know if it's going to be out. Hang on. Hang on. My ADD is like Sarah Beth Durst. It's a greenhouse. There's going to be a greenhouse book.
More plants.
The Enchanted Greenhouse is coming out in 2025. It has the same beautiful type of cover art. It's beautiful edges, beautiful teal edges. This is like a prequel. This is a prequel because let me just read this. Turla Perna broke the law because she was lonely, and she cast a spell and created a magically sentient spider plant. As punishment, she was turned into a wooden statue and tucked away into an alcove in the north reading room of the Great Library of Asylum. Anyway, so I won't go into more, but interesting. It's like a prequel to like the spider plant's existence.
Now I'm regretting I sold my copy of the Spellshop on Pango, and it sold right away. And now I kind of wish I kept it because it would be a nice set with this new one that's coming out with the teal edges. So anyway, it's gone now.
I goofed up in my notes, and so I forgot to write notes for. So this is my first book as well, The Spellshop, that I wanted to talk about and spend time on for the podcast. The next book would be Incidents Around the House, which I had mentioned is a horror novel. And I hear Archie in the background.
If he keeps this up, I'll have to close the door.
Incidents. I forgot to write notes for this. And what I was thinking is I wanted to have like a best of, like a recap, a year best of episode for us.
Yeah.
And so I will just use this as a happy accident to discuss this in more detail later. Okay. But this is a book that I read. It's horror. It is from Josh Malerman, Malerman. He wrote Bird Box.
Oh, I've heard of that one. Sure.
Yeah.
I haven't read it. But
this book takes place in a small town. The premise is basically that it's told by a young girl who's maybe 8 years old. And usually I hate books that don't use quotations. This is a book that does not use quotations, and it works so well because you are in more of a child's perspective and a child's telling the story. And you get the thoughts that she hears, or there is a monster. Let's just say there is a creepy monster. Is it real? Is it a ghost? Is it a demon? Is it not real? Is it her? So there's lots of different types of dialogue that's happening. And there's also dialogue from her mom and her dad. And it was an absolutely fascinating and just page-turning book. Super creepy. We're not talking bloody, gory, etc. Just what in the heck is happening? And this little girl also claims that this creature has been, I don't know if she's an unreliable narrator. I'll just say that. Other adults do start to see this monster, but is she misinterpreting that? Mm-hmm. Anyway, so fascinating, and we'll talk about it another time. So that's my second great, and it's totally 5 stars. I would give it 6 stars if I could.
Wow, that's quite an endorsement. You're kind of a hard grader, so if you like something that much, it must be outstanding.
It was really creepy, and it'll keep you thinking.
Okay, all right.
So a lot deeper. So what I'm trying to get to is that for a book that is narrated by a child, this is a book that is a story that is told that is so deep and profound and creepy.
Okay.
So what is your next book?
Well, I'm cheating a little bit because it's
Okay.
a series, and I read the first book,
Okay.
which is called The Girl in His Shadow, and I enjoyed it so much. I immediately purchased, like, read the last page, purchased the next one in the series.
Mm-hmm.
This series is called the Nora Beady series. So far, there's just the 2 books. The first book is called The Girl in His Shadow, and the second book is called The Surgeon's Daughter. And the author is Audrey Blake, and they are the first 2 books in the Nora Beady series.
Okay.
And it's published by Sourcebooks Landmark. The first book, The Girl in His Shadow, was published in 2021, and the second book, The Surgeon's Daughter, was published in 2022. So there's been kind of a delay, and I did read on Goodreads. A lot of people are asking the author, is there going to be a third book? We want to hear more about Nora Beady. And I think she's written it, but it's just a matter of getting it published. So anyway, these 2 books are historical fiction, and they follow the life of Nora Beady, who was an orphan who was
Mm-hmm.
adopted by a famous surgeon when her parents die in a cholera epidemic in the early 1800s. And I guess cholera was a real common cause of death, and there was periodically there would be epidemics. And Nora had cholera but survived, which was kind of unusual because it was a pretty devastating disease. So at any rate, rather than being raised conventionally, this surgeon, he just brings her home because, he didn't know what else to do with this
Mm-hmm.
orphan. So he brings her home, and he's a very cerebral scientist, and he has a housekeeper. So Nora's care has mostly been placed with the housekeeper, but she's a very precocious, bright, and personable child. And so before long, the surgeon is quite taken with her as well. So she gets to work alongside her surgeon adopted father, helping him do dissections. And these were in the days when it was really hard to get a body for dissection purposes. And so they would get bodies from maybe not, well, it wasn't legal. They would obtain bodies illegally and dissect them for medical research. And he had a clinic in their home, and she would help him by stitching up people's wounds and just working alongside him as a surgical assistant. And she was also very good at drawing anatomical illustrations that were extremely useful for people who were studying medicine. So her activities as a woman, helping her father do these medical activities, was not just frowned upon, but it was strictly illegal, with dire consequences for any woman who was found to be practicing medicine in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
And in the first book, there's a dramatic situation where Nora is called upon to actually perform surgery on someone that they know who turns up with a terrible situation that can only be corrected surgically. And she saves the man's life. She is assisted by a young doctor who the surgeon has taken on to be an assistant in his medical practice. But he has to take credit for doing this surgery, because if Nora comes out, she could face going to prison or, whatever the punishment is for doing that. So does she allow this man to take credit, or does she speak up and decide that she's going to say that she did perform the surgery? And she does. And there are consequences, but the consequences take place in the second book, which is called The Surgeon's Daughter.
Okay.
Nora gets invited to go to Bologna, Italy, where women are allowed to study and practice medicine. So she's going to get her medical license in
Wow.
Italy. And so she does. However, it's not an easy task. Women in medicine, even though it's allowed in Italy, there's a great deal of prejudice against women who are trying to find their way in this field and make contributions. And she develops a mentor who's a very famous woman surgeon who specializes in obstetrics, and her research is focusing on developing cesarean section techniques, because in the early 1800s, if a woman could not birth a child vaginally, she was at risk of dying, as was the infant. So Nora and her mentor are working on techniques to perfect the cesarean section technique. And of course, she gets a patient who will die if she doesn't have a cesarean section. And so Nora performs the surgery. And this could actually change medicine as it was known at the time, because this is an innovation that could make a huge difference in saving lives. So anyway, I found both of these books really inspirational, and it was a complete education to me that women, I mean, I knew it wasn't common to find women practicing medicine, but I didn't know it was illegal, and that they faced such punishment and censure for their interest in science. So anyway, I really admired the perseverance and the resilience of the main character in both of these books, and it was easy. Both of the books were easy to read. They were historical fiction. I really felt like I was taken back to that time. And in particular, her studies as a student at the University of Bologna in Italy were really, really interesting.
This reminds me, there was a book that came out, I think it was last year, and I can't remember the name of it. I'm looking on my Goodreads right now, about a Chinese medicine female doctor.
Oh, yeah, Lady Tan's Circle of Women.
Yes, that was a wonderful book as well, if this is a subject matter that people really like. So that's another recommendation. That was a great book.
I have to say, they were certainly more accepting of women practicing medicine in China than they were in England or America or Europe.
Absolutely.
So anyway, well, the books were educational. They were entertaining. I learned something, and it was a nice distraction. And I read both of these on my Kindle.
Excellent. Well, good. Okay. So we're getting some Kindle done. All right. So my third book that I read and can recommend, we talked about cozy. I read a horror book, and now I was reading a very thickly science fiction book. This is The Three-Body Problem by Liu. I can't pronounce the last name, but I'll just spell it Cixin. So I listened to this as an audiobook, and it's an absolutely fascinating read. Liu takes us back to the Cultural Revolution in the 1960s of China. This is a time that's really marked by intellectual suppression and a ton of violence. And then we take that theme and the author is challenging us to think about how those same dynamics would affect us if we had also made first contact with an alien civilization. And that's the dilemma. Should the human race decide to make contact? Should they not? If they make contact, this is with a race that is more than likely extremely superior. And therefore, are they going to put us out of our misery? Are they going to save us from ourselves? Because the author is basically promoting the fact that the human race it will end in destruction of itself. Okay, so the concept here, the three-body problem. Well, let me start over just for a second. The story doesn't really stop there with this first contact kind of situation. It delves really deep into a lot of physics, a little bit of math. We know math is not my thing, but also astrophysics, and introduces, there's a virtual reality game component in this book where players and different characters are trying to attempt to solve the three-body problem. So if you're not familiar with this concept, the three-body problem is a real physics concept where three celestial objects, it could be planets, suns, stars, that have similar mass and that are in close proximity and therefore exerting force on each other. There's no predictable pattern of their revolutions or how they will rotate with each other. So for example, like when two objects exert force on each other, it's a little easier to predict the rotation. We've got the moon, we've got Earth, we've got, the sun. We have set rotations that all of these masses are in. Anyway, this particular alien race lives in a place where they have a three-body problem, and they have adapted and become extremely evolved with their science and so forth. So that's all I will say, except that I'm a really big fan of Neil deGrasse Tyson, who is an astrophysicist, and he had read this, and also many booktubers on YouTube who really enjoy sci-fi have recommended this. I picked it up in an audio format. It starts out slow. I couldn't follow which character was which. The science is thick. Not incomprehensible. The concepts in the virtual reality portion of this book are unparalleled. Is writing. And this is a series. This is the first of 3.
Oh my.
And so I'm not sure if I'm ready for book 2 or 3, but I just wanted to throw it out there that I did get through it. It was amazing. But I also, I don't know what the hell's going on. So there's that.
I don't know, Sarah, if that's going to be my cup of tea, but
no,
I congratulate you for your
exercising my brain
and getting through it. Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Did you have another book, or are we on to our DNFs?
No, okay. I have one more book. I counted the Nora Beady book as one book because I read them like one right after the other. It was like one big long book for me. So my last book was actually quite sweet. It was called You Are Here by David Nicholls, and it was published by Harper in May of this year, 2024. Mm-hmm. And it was a charming contemporary book. It's set in England in the present day. And it's about 2 people who are adrift in their lives after each one of them experienced a very bad romantic breakup. I was trying to explain this book to my husband, and he must have zoned out because these people did not have bad breakups with each other. They were married to different people. They didn't even know each other. And they had terrible divorces. In the case of the man, he'd been married to a woman that he loved very much. Mm-hmm. And she wanted children, and he was not able to provide her with children. And she left him because she wanted a life that included her biological children of her own. Oh. So he was absolutely devastated that his wife left him under these circumstances because he loved her very much and liked his life. So what he has done to comfort himself is he takes long, rambling walks all across the English countryside, all by himself. Now, our female character is named Marnie. We've got Michael and we've got Marnie. Mm-hmm. Marnie had a lousy, rotten, no good ex-husband who cheated on her and never treated her very well and left her. So Marnie's reaction is quite different to Michael's. She has become very reclusive and spends almost all of her time in her flat by herself, drowning her sorrows. She's a writer or an editor, I think. So she works from home. She has no work colleagues that she interacts with. Her friends have tried and failed to get her to go out to dinner or get together for lunch or for any kind of social activity. She just is completely, almost borderline agoraphobic. She just stays home.
Oh.
So a mutual friend who knows both Michael and Marnie decides to organize a hiking group that will go on a 10-day hike across Great Britain. And she manages to convince Marnie and Michael to go on this hike. There'll be other people. It'll be a group thing. It'll be fun. They'll be out in nature. They'll see quaint villages, lots of countryside. Anyway, they both agree to do it. And Michael is put in kind of a leadership role because that's what he does, is he just takes long rambling walks all the time. So he's kind of the leader of this expedition. So this group of maybe a dozen people get together, they stay at a hotel, they organize themselves, and they plan their route across Great Britain. And the weather turns rotten, just rotten. I mean, like torrents of rain, mud that sucks the boots right off your feet. I mean, it's just awful, awful weather. Nobody wants to be outside. So one by one, the group dwindles and the people drop out. And so you can kind of guess where this is going. Michael and Marnie end up like the only two that are still participating on this walk. Marnie's not really enjoying herself, but she's sticking with it because she bought all this equipment and she doesn't have anything else to do.
Yeah.
So Michael and Marnie do not seem like a very likely pair. They don't seem like they have too much in common, except they both had horrendous breakups with their spouses. But their forced intimacy on this walk, I mean, every day they get up and meet in the hotel lobby and have breakfast together and then go off on a walk that takes hours. I mean, they'll walk like 20 miles a day. And they have conversations about life and about their aspirations and what they hope for in the future. And this forced intimacy seems to be just what each of them need, is to talk. It's almost like therapy because they get to talk about their experiences and the descriptions of the quaint English villages and the countryside and the views. The book was just written beautifully, and the characters were totally relatable. They seemed like if you felt like you knew both of these people and you're rooting for them because they both had not been treated very well by their, in their past relationships. And the blossoming friendship between the two of them just seemed really authentic. And I found the book to be quite uplifting. And I enjoyed it a lot on a lot of different levels. So I recommend that one.
Contemporary fiction?
I'd call it contemporary fiction. You Are Here by David Nicholls.
Very good. Okay. Let's talk about your DNFs.
Oh, boy. I love talking about DNFs. Okay. So when we had our last podcast, we talked about reading witchy books and spooky books and, let's just tackle October and just dive into these books with witchy themes. And I read a few good ones that were mentioned in the past, but these two books, maybe I was just done with this particular genre. It's very possible. I maybe OD'd on it. The first one was The Witches of Moonshine Manor by Bianca.
Oh, we reviewed this last time. Yes.
And it was published by Mira in 2022. And I'm very sorry to say that I found this book totally stupid. Absolutely inane. It's stupid. It starts out with a bunch of 80-year-old witches who live together like dorm style. And they walk around in the nude and they talk about their sexual exploits. And one of them even has some guy in her bedroom. And, I'm sorry. That is not for me. That was just like, what is your point? Honest to goodness. Okay. So that was my first DNF.
The plot was also not great with that book either.
I didn't give this book very many pages of a chance.
Your sister Kate wanted to read it because, of course, your
Our
maiden name is
maiden
in the
name
title.
is Shine, spelled Shyne, and that was how they spelled Moonshine. And so we were kind of taken with it because of
Yeah.
our name. But
I was taken with it because it was like promoting characters who were octogenarians, which I think is fun, and let's always support an older character, but not if the book's going to be stupid. So
yeah, it was stupid. So the second book was The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling, published by Avon in 2021. And this book has a very high rating
I
on
hated that book.
Goodreads. So, I mean, don't listen to me if, a lot of people love this book. I am not one of them.
I bought it. I bought this book and I got through like the
So
first
did I.
paragraph and was like, no.
I didn't buy the romance between the two main characters. Not at all.
No.
I thought the plot was completely far-fetched and it was boring. It was a boring story. And
Yep.
So not for me either.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, so those are the witchy ones that didn't work. I had two, and the first, they're both cozy and they have potential. And these actually might be great for other people. It could be that I just wasn't in the right mood for this. I cozied myself out.
Could they be books that were just not for you right now that you would give another chance to?
No.
Or is this just a definite, no, I'm done?
Maybe one of them I could read as like a family book in the car with Eva on a road trip.
Okay.
But the other one is like, I do not care. I do not. Anyway, so the first one was Can't Spell Treason Without T. I've heard a lot about this book. This is by Rebecca Thorne.
It's on our mutual Kindle. I saw it. You bought it. Yeah.
I bought it. This is a story about Reyna, who is a royal guard. She's like a ninja badass. And then Chianthe is the world's most powerful mage. So she's basically like a supreme wizard being. And they want to open a tea-filled bookshop and leave the world behind. Of course they do. They settle into a dragon-filled town and they build their dream shop, and they have lovely, actually great supporting characters. But this is like not as cozy as you would think. There is but I don't know how to describe it. It's slow paced. There is some gore involved because one of these main characters is an assassin. This is a sapphic romance, which I guess maybe is just not my thing.
Let me interrupt you and ask, when was this book published?
2022.
Do you think it was influenced at all by Legends and Lattes?
Totally. But it's bad. And it was, the characters need to be interesting and have their own flaws. And both of these characters are just so perfect and powerful. So they're also way too kissy face. Like, I love you. No, I love you. And it was just like, I'm bored. Where's the plot?
Yeah.
Anyway,
is that all you got?
That's all I'm going to say about this book. I just could not. I had to stop. The second one does have a lot of potential. I just couldn't. I'll be honest. I kept falling asleep. I was listening to it and I kept falling asleep. It did not hold my attention. This is Shady Hollow. This is the first in the Shady Hollow series. This is from Penguin Random House. Yes.
Right.
And I forgot to put who it's by. It's by like Juno Black or somebody.
It's got little animals that are the main characters, right?
This is like if you took Louise Penny's cozy French Canadian village with Inspector Gamache.
The Three Pines books, yeah.
If you took the Three Pines world, but everybody in the book was a different type of animal,
like a squirrel or a fox. Isn't the main character? Isn't it a fox?
Yes.
The detective is Detective Vixen.
So like this could be super cute, right? Okay.
Yeah.
This is basically your main character is reporter Vera Vixen, and she lives in Shady Hollow and she writes for the local newspaper. There is a local beaver who owns the wood mill. The local bachelor Moose owns the coffee shop. there's a hummingbird who writes a gossip column. Like it sounds so cute.
It does.
But
it sounds charming.
none of the characters had depth. It was as if this was a children's book where you have like Bob the police bear. Bob's kind of big and kind of grumpy and kind of dumb.
Like the
And
Richard
that's it.
Carey book, Slowly Worm, and
But it didn't go further. It was like too simple, too childish, and yet we've got like there's murder that happens. This was not an adventure that I wanted to go on with these adorable, lovely characters. I didn't care about them. It's hard to screw that up, I would think.
I think that it sounds like the author got a little bit confused about what direction they wanted to go in.
It seems like it. And there was in the prologue, there's a little mention like from an author's note, and she's basically like, suspend disbelief. We've got mice and moose and a panda bear, and they all interact in the same world. They go to the same hospital. They go to the same cafe. I could not get my brain wrapped around this. The moose has hooves. How is he serving coffee? Does he have little teeny cups for the mice? Like, I could not do this book. So, anyway, okay, your turn. What are you looking forward to, Mom?
I bought a book and I wanted to show you the cover, and please promise me that once I give you the title and the author that you will look up this book so you can see how pretty the cover is.
Okay.
And it's called The Book Lover's Library by Madeline Martin, published by Hanover Square in September of 2024. And this is the author who wrote The Last Bookshop in London, which I read, and I really loved it. And if you also enjoyed The Last Bookshop in London, this historical fiction book might be for you as well. It's the story of a widow. Her name is Emma Taylor, and her daughter Olivia. It's set before and during World War II. And I did not know this, but can you believe that there were legal restrictions prohibiting widows from most employment opportunities at that time in England? I don't know. I can't understand it. I mean, why?
What are they supposed to do to support themselves?
I mean, who needs employment more than a widow who's trying to support kids? Anyway, I don't know. That's something to look into for sure. The only job Emma can find is to work at her local library. And when the war begins, her daughter Olivia has to be evacuated to the countryside, which was common for people who lived in London. They wanted to save the kids, and they would get sent out to families who lived in the country who would foster them during the time that the war was going on. And Emma's left on her own working at the library, and her only companions are her co-workers, the library patrons, and her neighbors. And as the war continues, Emma struggles to reunite with her daughter Olivia, but finds hope in her community and in literature at the library. And it sounds like an ultimately really hopeful and entertaining read. Mm-hmm. And I can't wait to dive in. And do look up the cover because it's really pretty.
It is really pretty. It's basically like a shelf of books, but there's also like some little city scenes that are kind of photoshopped in. It's very nice looking.
Do you love books about books? I always enjoy books that have literary references to other books that I may have read.
I like books that feature writers as the main character too. I think that's interesting.
There's a book. It didn't get the greatest reviews. It was called The Writing Retreat, and I think
I have that. I haven't read it.
I think it was a Book of the Month book, and I think that's where I got my copy. And it doesn't have the greatest reviews, but I love the concept of it. I definitely think
it's kind of like and then there was one, like.
Right.
Or
it's
10 Little Indians.
What do they call it? Not a closed room mystery. Anyway, there's no escape. These people are all stuck together at this
and then
writers
they keep dropping dead.
Dropping dead. We should do a buddy read. We should read that. And then
let's do that.
The new year. Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that. Well, I am looking forward to The City and Its Uncertain Walls, which might come in the mail today from my favorite bookshop, which is nextchapterbooksellers.com not back, but over in Minnesota.
I want you to talk more about that bookshop after you finish describing the book. So let's go back to that.
So The City and Its Uncertain Walls is a new release by Haruki Murakami. We know that I love.
Oh, right.
I love him. I feel like his books are a little bit hit or miss. The last book was way too long and I just couldn't get into it. But I had a friend who read it who loved it. That last book had like little elf creatures that were in it, like weird. Anyway, this is obviously a Japanese writer. The premise here is that there is a nameless young couple, a boy and a girl. They're teenagers who are in love. And one day the girl disappears. And for the rest of his life, this young man grows up and this absence haunts him. And he begins to search for her in his middle age. And he goes on a journey between the real world and an other world. This is a mysterious and perhaps imaginary walled town where there are unicorns and there's a gatekeeper who determines who can enter and who cannot. There are shadows that are untethered from themselves. And so this guy leaves his life in Tokyo behind and ventures into the small mountain town where he becomes this head librarian, only to learn the mysterious circumstances surrounding the gentleman who had the job before him. Seasons pass. I don't know. The boundaries between these two worlds begin to bleed and blend into each other. That's all we got. And with any Haruki Murakami premise that you read, typically that has nothing to do with what the book is actually about. So that's all I got. Wow. I did get the, like, whatever this edition is. This is like a special edition that has different cover papers that you could switch out. There is a design, but there's a semi-transparent different set of covers that you can put over. So innovative. You could have the Tokyo world or you could have the other world cover. So
I've never heard of such a thing.
I will share that on Instagram when I get it in my hands. So my favorite bookshop to purchase from is Next Chapter Books. They are just super kind and so warm and friendly. And they always write me little notes. They're like, here you go, Sarah. Looking forward to seeing what you think about the book.
Kind of personal touch.
They're really nice. So nextchapterbooksellers.com. So if they are an independent bookshop. If you want to support independent bookshops, of course, there's always one that's closer to you. And I could certainly buy from some here in California, but I prefer this company just because they have great customer service. I met them through author Andrew D. Young, who did a book signing with them and they were really heavily promoting him. And I just appreciated how great they were to him and how great they are to their customers.
Well, I have an independent bookstore that I really enjoy as well. And they have a book subscription. It's the bookshop is in Waco, Texas, and it's called Fabled.
Cool.
And they have a woman who works there named Elizabeth Barnhill. And if you follow Fabled on Instagram, you'll learn all about Elizabeth. And she also participates in the Currently Reading podcast, where she and Meredith Monday Schwartz, who's one of the co-leaders of the podcast, meet once a month and talk about mysteries and detective procedurals and books that are mystery thriller, but more on the police procedural and mystery suspense end of the spectrum. Anyway, Fabled offers several book subscriptions, and I joined the one called Sleuth, which every month I get a book that's personally selected by Elizabeth Barnhill, who's brilliant. And they're more expensive. I mean, these hardbacks are going to cost, $30.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a lot more than you'd pay if you bought, through Amazon or other discounted sources. And I've been really, really happy with the books that Elizabeth has selected. The one I'm reading currently is called Death at the Sanatorium by Ragnar Johnson, I think is the last name.
Is this like a Scandi noir kind of book?
Yes, it's set in Iceland, and the author is Icelandic, and the book, I assume, is translated. Although maybe he wrote it in English. I don't know. What do they speak
Sounds
in?
good.
Anyway, it's very good, and it's not. They're often backlisted books, and the only problem is sometimes the books that I buy through Fabled, through my Sleuth subscription, are free on Kindle Unlimited.
Oh, womp
And
womp.
so that's kind of a bummer. I kind of wish they'd research that and not, because it kind of just rubs salt. And, I wish they'd chose, I don't mind spending $30, but not if I
Yeah.
can get the same darn book for nothing.
Yeah.
So anyway, but
Well,
their selections have been great. And I do really enjoy Elizabeth Barnhill's taste in books. So
great.
if you like mysteries and suspense,
Yeah.
check out Fabled in Waco, Texas.
Well, I think we'll wrap up here. And I know that Dad's been calling me. He's probably calling you. He's probably bored. So
He's bored to death.
poor Dad.
He gets out of the hospital on Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving. So we have
Okay.
lots to be grateful for this year.
For sure.
And hopefully I can keep him entertained once I get him home. He's still not mobile. So,
He needs to listen to audiobooks.
That's actually a great idea.
Yeah. And
I'll
podcasts.
work on that. Yeah. Well,
All right,
thank
Mom.
you, Sarah. This was lots of fun.
Bye, friends.
Bye.